There are cases where some things are able to evolve far beyond what they were ever supposed to be, for better or for worse. There is no greater example of this than the Grineer. Let us begin. During the height of the Orokin Empire, the Grineer used to be far different than what we see today. Originally, the Grineer served the purpose of being the main labour force for the Empire, specifically cloned and genetically tinkered with to only be capable of performing hard labour, without much capacity left for intelligence. They were also heavily conditioned to obey their Orokin masters. This began to change during the events of the Old War, when a lone Grineer worker came into close contact with a sentient, and against all odds, managed to strike it down with a plasma shovel, while sustaining heavy injuries. With the once powerful sentient being reduced to mere scrap left on the floor, being somehow struck down by a lowly worker. After falling unconscious for some time, the Grineer worker awakes to two Orokin who happen to discover him and what he had done. Seeing the carnage left behind, the Orokin came up with a new idea. In their desperation to win the war, the Orokin were willing to try anything to combat the sentient invasion. Saying that this Grineer worker was capable of killing a sentient by himself, the Orokin intended to use his genes for a new batch of Grineer clones. Except this batch wouldn't be used for mere manual labour. This new line of Grineer would be specifically bred for combat. These Grineer were given different modifications to be more effective in combat compared to their manual labour focused counterparts. This new batch of Grineer were made to be stronger, faster, and more importantly, given the ability to be more free thinking and intelligent, in comparison to earlier Grineer who had more restricted thinking capabilities. Despite this new Grineer army being utilised in the Old War, they were not enough to turn the tide against the sentients until the Tenno later joined the fight and were the main factor in why the Orokin won the war. However, things began to really change for the Grineer amidst the Orokin Empire's collapse after the Tenno's betrayal when the Old War ended, with an unseen genetic mutation in some Grineer clones being the spark needed to set off an unforeseen change of events. After the Tenno killed most of the high-ranking Orokin, the system fell into total chaos. Two Orokin survived the Tenno's initial betrayal, Executor Avantis and an Orokin in the Sectaris class named Bilsa. The two were trapped on an Orokin tower that had been overrun with infested. They find their way to the lower levels with an intent of escaping the tower, and ultimately re-establishing the Council of Executors. Upon exiting the elevator, they encounter some Grineer labour clones. Executor Avantis is furious that the Grineer don't kneel to her immediately, with a larger Grineer hesitantly taking a knee with the others following him. They realise that the hangar they needed to use to escape was in the next room, but is heavily overrun with infested. Avantis orders the Grineer workers to clear out the horde and makes comments to Bilsa about leaving them behind in earshot of the larger Grineer. After making their way to an escape vessel, the larger Grineer kills Executor Avantis and takes Bilsa hostage, as many of the ship's functions were locked behind biometric security, only capable of being bypassed by a true Orokin. This betrayal from the Grineer should not have been possible. They were genetically designed to obey their Orokin masters. As it would turn out, an unseen mutation had occurred in some Grineer clones, allowing them to rebel against their creators and heavily influence the other Grineer with lesser thinking to join their cause. During her time with the Grineer rebels, Bilsa became sympathetic to their cause and abandoned her mission of restoring the Orokin Empire to assist with the Grineer rebellion. The large Grineer, now calling himself Vaytok, had used Bilsa to help him travel the solar system to gather more Grineer, subsequently causing mass Grineer rebellions and riots throughout the entire system. Over time, the Grineer began pillaging Orokin technology and managed to gain control of the Orokin cloning templates, securing their legacy and a means of reproducing themselves to maintain their numbers. Despite Vaytok being a crucial factor in the uprising, the Grineer still lacked true leadership. That was until they encountered a pair of twin sisters. Born during the New War, they were heavily shunned due to a negative stigma the Orokin had towards the birth of identical twins. As they grew up, the only people they had to rely on was themselves, and this made their bond become unbreakable. almost as if they were a single being. These sisters had a true understanding of each other's soul, and when the Grineer encountered this, seeing how deep their bond was and the fact that they were identical, the Grineer desperately wanted something like this for themselves. And with this in mind, they bowed to the sisters where they ultimately became the Twin Queens, thus establishing the Grineer Empire. Modern-day Grineer operate under an extremely xenophobic regime, wishing to purge all those that are non-Grineer from the Origin system, coupled with a religious and fanatical loyalty to the Twin Queens. The Grineer Empire has a firm grip on several areas of the Origin system, such as most of Earth, Saturn and Ceres. They also follow a militaristic structure with several divisions for different purposes. Frontier units are used in harsh overgrown environments, such as Earth. Space Marines guard massive Grineer galleons and mining facilities. The Drakkar are stationed inside deep laboratories, whilst arid units are specialised in desert warfare. Tusk Grineer are trained for combat over vast and wide areas, such as the plains of Eidolon. The Night Watch are elite yet rarely seen Grineer units that carry out vital tasks all over the Origin system. Cosma/Gyre and Exo units are trained for combat in space, manning different fighter crafts. And finally, the Kuva soldiers. These Grineer are responsible for the protection of the Queens themselves aboard the constantly moving Kuva fortress, rarely leaving it unless it's to harvest Kuva or attempt to invade the recently emerged Zariman 10-0. However, the passage of time has not been so kind to the Grineer following their uprising during the Orcan Empire's collapse. Centuries of overusing the cloning templates have led to them becoming extremely damaged, causing this current era of Grineer to be extremely disfigured, suffering from a condition referred to as clone decay syndrome. The extensive damage to the cloning templates has allowed for random genetic mutations to occur in individual Grineer to varying degrees. In most instances, the mutations cause severe physical deformities to some degree in all Grineer soldiers. This forces them to compensate by replacing several organs or limbs with cybernetics to stay alive. Depending on where a certain Grineer soldier lands on the hierarchy, they can be granted higher quality weapons and cybernetics. Another side effect of the severe degradation of the cloning templates is that some Grineer are created with a lack of loyalty to the Queens, often defecting from the Grineer Empire and joining peacekeeping federations like the Steel Meridian. These mutations can also lead to wild variations in intelligence. While most Grineer weren't exceptionally intelligent to begin with, even prior to the severe misuse of their cloning templates, the genetic mutations has led to some notoriously intelligent Grineer to be created, an example being Tyle Regger, a talented geneticist whom is making strides in reversing the damage to the cloning templates, only being held at bay from his goal by Tenno strike teams. Dr. Tengus, another uniquely intelligent Grineer, created the Groostrike reconditioning facility and is the one responsible for creating the Grineer ghouls that plague parts of the Origin system. There are also other Grineer, unique from the rest, being granted the gift of immortality from the Queens themselves, becoming powerful enough to rival the Tenno. These mere clones have done what was once thought to be impossible by the Orcan Empire, and have become a powerful and extremely dangerous force in the Origin system. Their current condition be damned.